Okay, how many folks do we have?
30. Well, including us, so 27.
Well, I wanted to make sure Mr. Richardson was on. Should we give it one more minute and then we can get started?
Is he first up?
Yes.
I'll drop him an email.
He didn't provide.
What was that?
Yeah. Well, I suspect the status will be really quick, but I just wanted to put them on to provide a quick update. And Gary is last, so I'm not going to worry about him for another hour.
Okay. I sent a note.
Okay. We'll give Ned one more minute. Looks like he dropped off and is trying to come back in.
Okay.
All right. I see Ned back on. So we should go ahead and get started. And hopefully everyone can hear me. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. This is the second day of the IETF 109. I have a typo on my slide here. So this is the first of two sessions for the remote attestation procedures. And why is this not advancing? Okay, so I think most everyone should be well aware of the note well, so we'll do that, pass on quickly. And I will say thank you to Panway and Thomas for helping Ned with the note taking. I wanted to do a quick test since you're all on Meet Echo. I figured you're all knowledgeable on how to use the system. And the minutes and notes are being taken in CodiMD. I wanted to do a quick test on the hand raising. So for those who are not familiar, on the top left, should be a little graph. I'm going to start a question to see a show of hands. Do you know how to ski? Raise your hand if you know how to ski, or select do not raise your hand if you don't know how to ski. So I'll give that a few seconds. Okay, I guess half the people don't really want to participate.
Hi, this is
I'll give
Hank.
it a few
And
more
that's an
seconds.
excellent. Sorry. I think that's
What's
an
that,
excellent
Hank?
test. That's an excellent test. But what does it mean when someone is not raising, not raising anything? Not raising or not raising. I mean, what's abstaining?
Raise your hand means yes, you do know how to ski. Do not raise your hand means you do not know how to ski. So think of raise your hand as a yes and do not raise your hand as a no.
And if I do not click do not raise your hand, does that mean I did not raise my hand?
If no, it just means you're not participating
Okay.
in the vote.
Okay. So it's an abstain here. Okay.
So
because in the room it will look different.
Okay, I'm going to count. Yep. I'm going to count to 5 and I'll end the session. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's interesting. I would have presumed more people would have known how to ski. So 25 of 35 participated, 15 said they know how to ski, 10 said they do not. All right, so in case I need to have a show of hands, you now know how to use it. So let's continue on. Okay, so for today's agenda, and actually I didn't have many requests for time. So even though I have time allocated here, if the sessions run long, so I'm going to be a little loose with the time, what we can do is we can spill over the discussions to Thursday, unless there's any objections to do that. But this is the agenda as we have it today. We're doing the agenda bash. So any comments or feedback on the agenda? Yes, Hank.
Sorry.
You're on the queue?
No, I'm queuing. Thank you. Yeah, I have an item that I was missing, I think. I should give maybe a tiny report on the current status of UCCS. I don't have a presentation for that, but it is an added item to any other business, I guess, if the time allows.
Okay. Sounds good. I asked you about that. You said you weren't going to be ready. Okay. So I've noted it for the end. Any other comments or feedback? Going once? Going twice? All right. So next on the agenda is, I don't know if Michael is on for the architecture draft. I don't see him. So I issued a working group last call for the draft. I didn't see any feedback on the mail list. So for the authors of the architecture draft, I also didn't see any new issues get posted on the GitHub. So my question to the authors is, did you receive any feedback independently? Hank, you're in the queue.
No, personally, there was no email that I received personally, and I only got feedback from. Yeah, again, Thomas is on the line, so maybe he can talk to that.
I did not get any other outside email.
Thomas?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, and then I'll let Dave speak because I didn't quite get what he said. But go ahead, Thomas. Thomas?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Okay, am I the only one that cannot hear Thomas?
Hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so we have a big review that's still outstanding, but I will spend some time in the afternoon trying to collect all the comments that we have and you know, either create PRs or make a big mail to the list. Yeah, we have reviewed the draft quite thoroughly.
Okay. So this is why I wanted to do a raise of hands. How many have reviewed the draft? How many have read the architecture draft? Okay. Please raise your hand if you have read the draft.
The latest version or any version?
The latest version.
So we have one yes in the chat. I don't know if they're also raising their hand.
They are raising their hands. So Kathleen, if you click on the top right little graph icon, you can see the results.
Right, I don't know if that individual was.
Okay, I'm going to count to 5 and then stop the session. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we have quite a few that have read the draft, the latest version. So what I'm trying to assess is readiness to go for publication. So Thomas, if you can send out your feedback, do you think you can do it in the next week, or do you need 2 weeks, given that Thanksgiving is next week as well?
I don't think anyone's traveling.
Yeah. People having, Thanksgiving family reunions and stuff. So I was covering my face.
I guess it depends on where they live, yeah.
So I guess my question, and we can put it in the chat, I'd like to get a couple more people to provide feedback on readiness for publication. Thomas, it sounds like you have more comments for it as well. Is that correct? Oh, Eric, you're in the queue. Sorry, I didn't see that.
That's okay. I just joined the queue. I've read the draft, but I could do one full scrub. I'll have a scrub done by the end of this week.
Okay, if you can just post, even just a line of you've read the draft and you believe it's ready to go, that'd be great.
No, I'll do a full scrub.
Okay. Dave, you're on the queue. Dave Thaler.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So all I was trying to say earlier was just that, same as Hank, I have not received any private mails, just what's on the list.
Okay.
So I have obviously read it, and I think it's good, but maybe it can be better if Thomas and folks have questions. But the one thing that maybe or your comments, the one thing that the working group may want to agree on is there anything we should do differently based on the IPR declaration?
That was going to be my next question. So thank you for setting that up. So let me let Hank speak and then,
We did get a response on the list in terms of the declaration. So it's from version 2. So it's different than what I had asked the questions on. I was actually digging into this. If you saw that I was doing something, that's exactly what I was doing.
right.
So I'm wondering if there was prior IPR, quite frankly. So maybe there's no need to do anything else.
On the IPR.
Yep. I'll keep digging into that. It's just in China so far filed. And then the working group has to
Call here,
decide.
but my understanding was the answer was the IPR affects what is now the composite devices section and the attestation section.
Correct.
Yes.
So that does put the question as to what we want to do and how we want to deal with that. And the we is the working group, right?
So, but if there's prior IPR, does that matter? I mean, if there's prior art out in the field that's been, like, the composite device isn't that novel.
Well, I would suggest, Kathleen, that we all check with our respective corporations. So the fact that there's IPR in China, right? Different countries may treat their IPR differently. Right. So if you have products that go into China, the fact that there's prior art listed in the US, how does that compare to China? I don't know. Right.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure.
So Dave, did you have comments against that on the IPR?
I just wanted to make sure that the working group knew about it and could decide what to do, but I don't have any opinion on the matter. I have not
Okay.
consulted with my own legal, so I don't know if my own legal would have any opinion on the matter, but I personally don't.
Okay. And Hank, you've been in the queue, but we see your little robot and your shoulder.
This is a rat. I'm sorry. By the way, this is the year of the rat in China at the moment. So that's a current topic. And also you were asking me something, and that is why I queued. It was about, I think, review. And now I actually forgot the question, but what I remember to say was that I will do after the pull-in of agreed upon changes from Thomas and others. I committed to do a editorial pass for consistency after rework. Which will not touch any technical details, of course, but there has to be at least, I think, one editorial pass before we send this upstairs. And I wanted to highlight that this is still on my queue.
Right. But I'd like to see some feedback to the working group last call from at least three people in the working group. So Eric volunteered, Thomas will be another one. If we can get one more. Yes, Dave, 3 people other than the authors, because I'm presuming the authors would believe it's ready to go. Eric, I don't know if you still wanted to be on the queue. You're first on the queue and then Guy. Okay, thanks. Guy? Guy, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. Okay, Guy, you need to unmute yourself. We still cannot hear you.
Okay, I think I got it. Sorry.
There. Got it.
Yeah, I'll try and take a look at it this week.
Great. So we got Guy, Eric, and Thomas. Great, thanks. All right, so with that, we can now move on to
And
the
just one
Chara
note, just
draft.
do go back to the older version for sections 4, 3, and 6, because the current section 7 has a lot more content. So it is very different.
Ah. I actually have to switch every time. 2 clicks, 3 clicks, 4 clicks. And we're off. Okay, so Eric? Chara?
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, I'm a little bandwidth limited, or I'd send you a video of my dark room, so I'm just going to go with audio. I'm speaking on behalf of the authors for the Chara draft, and we have only a small update since the interim that we gave just a few short weeks ago, but we do have some updates. So next slide. For those of you who have not been paying quite as close attention, the purpose of Chara is to provide a Yang data model of a network equipment, such as a router or a switch. And we're trying to allow the challenge and response, which is where Chara comes from, into the device in order to get to TPM 1.2 or TPM 2.0 devices in order to retrieve PCR quotes from the device. And this contribution is defining the objects in order to do a challenge response into a device. As this slide shows, there's a Yang Doctor review underway. And one of the quick updates here is discussions have started with the Yang Doctor. I did give a overview to Mahesh, who's our Yang Doctor. And Mahesh is now understanding the model. He apologizes to not having something in earlier. He was getting his own drafts into this particular IETF, but he does understand and appreciates that there is some good work as he now has an intro, and he does like some of the other elements of the draft, including the focus on the removing of potential errors that have gone in recent versions. Next slide. Now, the Chara document is relationships to a number of other documents. If you look upstream, we have on the top left the architecture doc, and that architecture doc is defining much of the terminology which gets used for Chara. In addition, there is the RATS interaction model, and it also has a relationship to the interaction model as well, because you can do interactions such as getting remote attestation out of the device. The model as well is also based on the document which has gone through working group last call before, and that is the network device attest, which defines the use cases and operational prerequisites. There are documents which depend on Chara. There's a network device subscription draft. We have been considering putting that draft up for adoption. As soon as we get through the first Yang Doctor's review, the ability to subscribe to a device is something that some of the authors might be putting up into that. And the final one is there's a draft for trustworthy path routing. And that draft, as well as the subscription draft, are not being discussed here in this IETF, mostly because they've not changed a lot since our last review, but mostly because we're trying to make sure that the other prerequisite drafts are in a pretty close to final state in order before we look for an adoption. One note is that all the drafts that are dependent are fully integrated into the Yang models, that are defined by Chara. They just extend the Yang models that are in Chara. Next slide. Now, we reviewed a number of these issues in the interim. There's a lot of information which has been updated since earlier versions of the draft. One thing we closed since the last IETF main session is we've gone ahead and added a Yang model with all the TCG algorithms and created error checks to make sure that only those algorithms are usable within the model. We added NetEquip boot logs based on a request from some people over at Huawei. We refined the model to eliminate redundancies and errors, remove certain keys, and added other descriptive text. So I think that these are things we chatted about before. Nothing has changed on this element of the model since the review we did at the interim. Next slide. Open issues. As I mentioned, there are an XPath expression which needs to be built to validate some extra data integrity, and these will need reviews by the Yang doctor. Mahesh, as part of the Yang doctor review, agreed to help complete the XPath expression review. And after the Yang doctors are done with the comments, we want to go ahead and address any of those comments. We have to wait till those come in. There's also been an open question on maximizing commonality between the TPM 1.2 and TPM 2.0 RPCs. Right now, at least some of the authors believe that the TPM 1.2 is too complex. We have asked several times for an expert in TPM 1.2 to go ahead and help us to confirm that our understandings are correct. But as to date, we do not have a TPM 1.2 expert who is able to, or who has yet agreed to provide the details needed to say this is exactly the kind of quote information we need out of TPM 1.2. We had some initial responses, but we haven't gotten somebody to look at the details. So that remains one open issue which we need to address. Next slide. We did close the issue that we brought up during the interim name about including TPM node and node ID into the RPCs, and we've gotten responses to the query that we made, and that is that there's no objection to reducing the minimized form of the RPC, which is using certificate name as an input to a multi-TPM device in order to identify which devices you want to get the quotes from. So it looks like we've closed out this particular issue from the last interim. Next slide. So next up, well, we got to wait the Yang doctor comments in order to get through Yang doctor review. We need to make sure we get the XPath scrubs done. We need to validate the 1.2 structures, and once we're there, we're going to propose working group last call. And so that is where we are at. Any thoughts or questions?
So do you know somebody that could help with the TPM 1.2 validation?
Not as good as I would like. I would hope that somebody who is a true expert in 1.2 would be willing to make comments. We had some initial movement on the list, but we did not close those queries. So I personally don't know somebody that I think would be somebody who is involved with building and using those TPM 1.2 structures. There's always the option of removing TPM 1.2 from the architecture. I hope we don't do that. And the reason is that there's a whole lot of devices with 1.2 out there. So I'm still hoping that we can find somebody to review those structures.
Eric, it's Guy. We'll dig in TCG a bit and see if we can find someone to help there.
That'd be great. And if we can get somebody there, I mean, you and I and others who know, I guess Yang and Chara and whatnot, it can always be a group meeting. It doesn't have to be just an email interaction to train them on how to read Yang, because most normal people don't read Yang.
Okay, great. That was a question in the chat, so they
Yeah.
don't have to understand Yang. Thank you.
Great.
Other questions? All right, that's it for this one then.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Keep us posted.
Will do.
Okay, next, Hank.
Hi, this is Hank, not the red, not literally the red. Sorry. So yeah, I'm Hank Berkholz. I will give a quick report on the interaction model ID. This is basically the similar slide deck as was presented in the last virtual interim. Next slide, or the first slide actually, please. So there has been some development here. This is again basically the same slide, but there's something new. It's in bold letters, and that's a GitHub emerging GitHub project that I wanted to highlight here. It's on the verifier side of things, and Thomas is apparently very familiar with this because he's a big contributor to this open project. It's about a Go implementation of the verification side of remote attestation here, and therefore it's an essential building block for the interaction model. It's a consumer of evidence, for example, and the consumer of attestation appraisal policies, for example. So that's worth to highlight here in a quick spotlight. There are still other things to come, but it is apparently related to the interaction involved. Next slide, please. So the idea was adopted and updated recently before the last virtual interim. There has been some content polish. There effectively no content was added anymore. So I think we are at the moment beyond that phase, unless someone comes up with yet another interaction model, which is, after we were talking about this in the architecture on a very abstract level, relatively unlikely. So that's the current things that have happened. Now coming to the things that are happening on the next slide. So I issued a formal request for some review on two sections of the draft explicitly. Of course, general review is always welcome, but to focus attention a little bit, there was section 6 and section 7 here, which include normative language. This will be elaborated on the next slide. So first item is there are some prerequisites that has to be probably, it's assumed to be a good list, but maybe there is some inconsistency there, so feedback is nice about what you actually need to start an interaction, what the attester has to satisfy on requirement side. So that's covered in section 6, and if someone is not able to find themselves or their use case or a anticipated or worked on solution draft here, that would not be ideal. So feedback on that front is always welcome. Same goes with the generic information elements that are required to interact, for example, between attester and verifier role. That's a very, very concise set of information elements that you probably always will need if you run a protocol between these two roles for conveyance of information over the internet. But maybe something is confusing phrased here, or you think, no, I can live without that. Why is this mandatory or something like that? That would be nice feedback also. Next slide, please. NC looks.
That's the only one. That's the last one.
Oh, okay.
That's it.
Clear. Yeah, then this is probably on me. There should be another slide that is talking about track. So imagine a topic that is track, and so the idea is categorized as informational currently. It nevertheless uses normative language. So that's not a problem itself, but I think at the virtual interim, the question was raised, should this be considered to be standards track or not? I actually at the moment don't think so, but there might be opinions about that. So if there are comments or feedback regarding this topic, of course, that's interesting. For now, I would leave it informational, unless proven otherwise, and then we can up-level it. But that's a working group decision, and so I just wanted to highlight this here. That's basically it.
Okay, so Dave Taylor just posted +1 to Hank. But I'm not sure if he was referring to the information versus standard or something else. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah,
Dave, you may be muted because I can't hear you.
I think it just takes a minute for me to make it through. You guys can hear me now, right? Yeah. So I was +1 the leave it as informational, regardless of whether it uses normative language. I think I was one of the people that asked that, but it's actually okay to do that if you want to do that. But I do think it's informational, and that's because I don't think an implementation implements and directly conforms to the interaction model spec. It implements and conforms to a protocol document, which in turn uses an interaction model. So it only implements it indirectly by some other spec that would be normative, and that's why I think that informational is the right thing.
Thanks.
Yep. All right.
Okay, then I will relinquish the floor to the next presenter. Yes, that's it, basically.
Thanks, Hank. All right, so Lawrence, EAT.
Hello. You can hear me okay?
Hello. Yes.
All right. Next slide, please. So this is a kind of a picture of the claims and a few other things that are not exactly claims that I'm aiming to have completed in the EAT draft. So this would be the sort of the list of topics I'm expecting to cover in EAT. So you kind of get to working group last call when all of these topics are covered. So this is just trying to give everybody a picture or an idea and get feedback on whether all these topics should be covered in EAT and whether or not. Or so if you go to the next slide, I've got little bars there showing kind of where I think these things are. So for the bulk of this time here, I want to have discussion on some of these, so I won't go into them until we go into the discussion. But I'm basically interested in feedback of whether, which ones get completed. Do we want all of these things in EAT or not? So let me go through these quickly. By each topic. So starting with the top left on hardware identification, the thing that's missing there is some hardware version information. So there's some pull requests there, but they're not quite complete yet, and so I need a little bit more work there. Then COSWID, software identification. I believe there's consensus that we want to use COSWID for this. But I think there's some work to be done to sort of figure out exactly how it fits in. I found some comments on the COSWID draft itself around tagging and CBOR tagging and some other things like that. So I don't think I have any discussion for that today, but the basic message on that is that I'm assuming we're going to integrate COSWID, and then that would be a normative dependency on COSWID. Moving on to security characterization, there's an open issue and some discussion around that and a pull request. So I wasn't planning on discussing that today, but please see the pull requests and open issues on that and comment. Similar on the boot and debug state. There's open issues and pull requests related to that. So please look at those and comment on them. Measurement of running software, that's one that not too much work has been done. I filed a pull request for that today. So I believe that's on my list to talk about today if we get to it. Nonce and timestamps, believe that's pretty close to done. If you have any comments on that, please leave them. I wasn't planning on discussing that today. Identifying verifier input. That I've been talking about URLs for endorsements and key IDs. So the last couple of presentations I've made have been around that. I believe there's some consensus on that, and I have a lot of writing to do for that one. Context, purpose, and profile. Geary has got a pull request for context that needs some discussion. Some of the ARM folks have proposed a profile. This I have maybe the least handle on for all of these. So again, comments and discussion needed there relative to the pull request, and I didn't have that on the list for today. So submodules and nested eats. There's a pretty good pull request for that I haven't integrated yet that I think is close to being ready. I've been working a lot on an implementation of that in C. So really getting to understand how that fits together. Somewhat complicated to do some of the nesting stuff, so it's taken a little bit of a while there, just because of the way the CMOR works. Nothing I think there's at issue there. But I think we have a pretty good consensus on how that's fitting together. So that's the status of that. Then on to public keys. So that's a topic I have for discussion that I'd like to talk about today. And there's a pull request, and there's been a little bit of discussion on that. And then a GPS location that needs some writing. There's a couple of comments outstanding, and I need to work on that. So that's kind of the rough idea of work mostly related to claims and the big chunks of work that I think are needed for EAT, and roughly my plan. If you go to the next page, next slide, please. So then there's a few other things in terms of that weren't showing up on that graph. So I need to rework the introduction and related text with respect to RATS architecture. It doesn't, I mean, most of that text was written before the RATS architecture was done. So there's a fair bit of writing to do there. I think it needs more examples. Perhaps a verification procedure should be included. I mean, there's an open issue for that. So could you go back one slide? And at this point, maybe I could get some feedback on comments and questions on this as the set of work to complete EAT. to go for a working group last call.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
So does anybody have feedback as for this as the set of claims and major work to get EAT to last call?
Hank, you're on the queue.
Hi again, this is Henk. Yeah, hi, Lawrence. Thank you. I think the this watermark indicators here are super helpful to convey a sense of where we are. Thank you for that. Explicitly want to pick a item that is identify verifier input. So from the current, I don't know, go with the flow vibe, I think that the EAT has a strong focus on this core EAT, the base EAT, has a strong focus on being generated by the attester. So my first assumption is that the attester comes with some kind of endorsement or comes with some kind of their own IDs and such. So that's my question, basically. That's the start for my question. Do you anticipate this being generated by the attester still, or is this probably, because endorsements is a standalone thing, could be, of course, being created by the endorser, for example, as another source of this conceptual message?
So my focus here is just what's in EAT, so not other places. So it was for an identifier for an endorsement and a URL to fetch an endorsement, and the possibility of including an endorsement.
Okay, so that's basically the attester comes with some hints, and it provides these hints to the verifier. Okay.
Yeah. So very similar to, and maybe exactly. That's COSE X509, the X5U and X5T and X5 bag headers.
So it could come with a chain or for the certificate itself, and basically that.
Yeah. I mean, the better text is actually in the JWT Jose thing for those headers, but
okay,
basically,
so,
I was going to just make reference to those.
So the premise that I was illustrating a little bit. So basically, all of this EAT content claims here at the moment are attester-centric, and I think we should maybe, if we would agree with that, we should point that out early in the text at some point, I think. But I'm absolutely fine with that. And if we have some other claims for other conceptual messages, we can use the same structure like EAT, but make it the flavor for another conceptual messages in practice.
Yeah, the next topic I want to talk about is EAT for attestation results.
Okay.
So that's in 2 slides.
Okay, Dave Thaler is also on the queue.
Dave.
Got video, but no audio.
Well, it takes him a minute, is what he said. We still can't hear you, Dave. Not yet.
No. Yes. Test.
Now, yes.
There we go.
Now you're in.
And all right, great. So I just wanted to respond to Hank. So I am familiar with at least one open source project that's called the Open Enclave SDK. A few of you on the call have heard of it. That deals with implementing TEEs and so on, which is a number of these points on your slide here, on Lawrence's slide. But Hank, as far as the endorsements portion goes, one of the requests that we've seen as an option, even when you're talking about evidence, is to allow the endorsement to be pre-cached on the attester, And then when the evidence is generated and sent off to the verifier, then it uses the cached endorsement, so it comes in with the evidence rather than the verifier having to go and fetch it offline. Meaning both are interesting and both are separate options that should be supported. And so that's why I think I have seen demand for having endorsements coming from the attester as a way to relay it. And obviously the attester is not the creator of them. It just happens to include it in the evidence in the option where you're using the attester to pass the endorsements rather than getting the endorsements directly from the endorser to the verifier. And so that's why I think Lawrence's slide is perfectly fine. And so, yeah, I support the list of things on here. There's one or two things I have a question on too, but offhand it looks good. So thanks.
Yep. So I plan to allow the endorsement to come with in the 8. That's definitely on the list. Okay. If nothing else, then let me skip ahead 2 slides.
I'm sorry. I'm in
Hank,
the
did you
queue.
want to get back? He's in the queue.
Yeah.
Hank?
Yeah. So, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, so that's yeah. So that is we have to do some planning here, maybe. Of course, the each structure is very suitable for every other conceptual message, like attestation result, as we will see in a few slides, or endorsements. And I think we also have the notions of a composite evidence that was beforehand always as an example, an evidence that includes attestation results, so to relay, for example, some communication paths via interactions here. But personally, I would recommend to draw a visible line here and say these are claims for endorsements, and these are claims for attestation results, and these are claims for evidence. Make it maybe even at least very distinct sections or separate drafts in order to maybe push one out while working on the other. And then in the very core initial draft, highlight there can be composition of each stuff, and you're doing the nested each effectively. So that would be like it. And so that it is a modular thing, and you can that we as a group, for example, but also you with your work, could move forward and putting the lid of one thing, going with the attesters-based claims and highlighting, yes, there will be claims in other complementary drafts about including actual endorsements that are pre-deployed on attesters for offline use and convenience, for example, or for domain-specific applications, and then stagger and stage this work. Would that make sense to you, or is there a specific need to really merge all these claims in a single ID?
Well, I mean, first, I don't consider the endorsements a claim, and my intent was to put them in a separate place, basically in the COSE header. I think you can do the same with HOSE, so it's not a claim. But that's maybe just a semantic thing. I don't, my interest is in EAT being fairly comprehensive. I think there's value in that, having a more comprehensive draft rather than a lot of smaller drafts. That I have some preference for that.
I understand the idea of not making
so
the reader jump through a lot of
proceeding with
documents, and I think that notion is fine by itself. Again, maybe a quick question: is my audio better when my video is off? And there's feedback. Thank you. So maybe it's my bandwidth actually today. Sorry. Coming back to the topic, so the problem I see personally is that when we are basically dancing on 3 weddings at the same time, which are attestation results, evidence, and for example endorsements here, this will take a while still, and I don't know how long you think this, you anticipate this is to be in the works, so to speak, because if we wait for attestation results claims here. And finalize them to a concise set, that might take quite a while, don't you think?
Possibly. So my just focusing on endorsements for now.
Yeah, okay.
The only
okay,
point
then
I was
maybe
after
wait for the
was
attestation results
identifiers
slides
for
again. But
endorsements,
I
not the
think
content
having
of
some
endorsements.
stubs for these other
Just
conceptual
identifiers.
messages to be in composite evidence or composite EATs is fine. I would be a little bit cautious to wait for claim definitions here, and yeah, that's my comment basically.
Okay, so let's skip ahead to the slide on attestation results. I believe that's 2 slides forward.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and I have several discussion points here. I'm just going to go on these discussion slides until we run out of time. I'm not sure that we'll complete them all. I didn't intend to complete them all. I just wanted to have discussion on these things. So this is framing for some discussion. So. My understanding is there's pretty clear interest and consensus that EAT can be used for attestation results. We can use the CWT, GAWT, and UCCS formats are all useful. The EAT draft must discuss attestation results, but maybe only briefly. That's kind of the question as to how far do we go with it. If we decide to go not very far, we'll just put a little note that says, you know, EAT can be used for attestation results. See other draft or something like that. Now getting into some more interesting stuff here. I believe a lot of EAT claims are going to pass through the verifier into attestation results. Just you know, some of this comes from before we'd even split the verifier from the relying party. So in that context, we want to reuse as many claims as possible. So we don't want to, you know, have the verifier having to translate claims that came from the attester into, you know, attestation result style claims. So we really want to see this pass through for things. So for things like COSWIDs or something that I think are clearly should pass through, hardware IDs and hardware information, hardware version, all that stuff should be, is very likely that stuff that we will want to pass through the verifier. So we don't want to define new variants of EAT claims in attestation results. So that's one of the reasons for working on attestation results claims now. So then there's definitely some new claims I think are going to be needed in attestation results. So one would be that the verification succeeded. Another is the results of checking claims against reference values. Another might be certifications received by the attester. That's much more likely to be a pass-through from an endorsement. So I don't have a bullet here for it, but there's definitely claims that are coming from the endorser. I mean, I don't know if you call them claims when they're in an endorsement, but claims that come from the endorser, from the endorsement, that would kind of be bundled up in the attestation results by the verifier. So at this point, I'm interested in discussion, what everybody thinks about this, because as Hank points out, this could be a lot of work. And there's definitely some reasons we would want to do that when we're reusing claims. But it may be much more work than we wanted to take on for EAT.
So Dave Thaler's on the queue.
The delay to make it through.
Yep.
Yep. Hopefully you can hear me. All right. So Lawrence, yeah, I agree with almost everything on this slide. So that's great. I mean, I can't agree with the question because I have opinions on the questions, but I agree with all the statements on there. Other than I would make one wording amendment. for which I think is along the lines of what you actually mean when you say many EAT claims will pass through the verifier under attestation results, right? What gets passed through is really up to the verifier's policy, and so many EAT claims will pass through subject to verifier policy. The ones the verifier wants to pass through will pass through under attestation results, which I think is what you intend, and I agree with all the other stuff that's applied. Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm going to argue yes in the EAT document to the bottom question. And regardless of whether it's more work, it is the case I'm personally most interested in. And so each is most useful to me once the attestation result claims that you have on the slide there, like new claims for attestation result are needed. Once those are done, that's when this document becomes useful to me. One of the reasons that I wouldn't like to see them elsewhere is specifically because I agree with your points about reusing as many claims as possible, right? That the differences between what claims are evidence only versus attestation results only should be the minority of claims, right? Most of the claims could be passed through. And because of that, the document, I think, is mostly common. There's going to be a couple things that are different, and which is why you say perhaps only briefly. And so my hope is, well, maybe those new claims, if we can get them to be brief, I would rather get those done sooner because I personally probably won't use it until those are done. And so I'm all in favor of getting those done soon. The other things that you mentioned are new claims are needed. I think I had one other point and I've forgotten what it was. And so in case you want to respond to something, go ahead and I'll read through the slide and I'm sure I'll come up with it. Oh, I know what it was. Okay. My last point was one of the claims for attestation results, and it's not really a claim, it goes back to your point about submodules and nested EATs and things, which is one of the things that happens in attestation results sometimes is that the verifier also needs to include its own claim set as if it's an attester to say, I verified this stuff and here's something that proves or vouches for the fact that the verifier is the right thing, and then the relying party will receive that, act on the evidence from the verifier and say, yep, I trust this, and now I can act on the attestation results. So that shouldn't be required, obviously, but that should be one of the options because, and it's sort of like having a composite or a layered attestation. In other words, your attestation result needs to have nested the EAT claim set for the verifier itself. And so that would, I would add a bullet to your list where you say other question mark. That should be another thing that's an option. But I think that the structure already supports that. And so I don't think that there's a whole lot to do for that. So.
Okay.
Dave,
Okay, so you've
I think the evidence would be like the log file, right? The TPM log file or something else.
There's many different ways you can do evidence. TPM log, I am the one that is the least expert on that one there. And so I may not use that in any example or recommend it because I don't know what it's best for. There's other things. So for example, if it was SGX, just to look at NED, because things like Open Enclave and other projects use SGX. It's not a TPM log, right? It's an SGX quote.
Right, and then PCR. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we've got Eric on the queue.
On using attestation results in EAT for use in attestation results, I love the idea. I do think that there's some stuff that we can match other drafts here. On the trustworthy path routing draft, there is a set of about 10 different claims that could be considered as straw man for attestation results, which likely would be portable between different environments. These include things like boot verified, hardware authentic, file repudiated. So I would be interested in your opinion on those trustworthiness levels and their relevance or possible use as attestation result claims. Now, I know you might not have read it here, but maybe on list, I would love to hear if you think that those are the types of claims that you believe could be adopted in this space.
Okay, I'll read it.
Great.
That's it.
Thanks.
Thank
Eric.
you.
Hank, you're on the queue.
Yeah, hi. I think what Dave said is encouraging because that was my primary concern that this would stall due to that. So if Dave is very involved and will have a look on this, and everybody is basically asserting here right now, yes, we can do this right now. I'm pretty aware of the trustworthiness factors. I am aware of some other requirements with the attestation results that might take longer. But still, if this is if the group agrees, this is we can do this right now. I'm very happy about this, and this is not a blocking comment. It was never intended to be. It was just a concern. So I like what I hear, and under the light of that, I think, or in the light of that, I think it's rather suitable to reuse stuff, of course, in the same document. Again, for the sake of readability also. And so my voice as a contributor is now in favor if we actually can pull this off. Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you.
I think you have some guidance. All right.
Okay. So, like I said, I was going to just keep using time until you tell me to stop. So, just tell me when to stop.
So let's do a pause. Yeah, let's do a pause here and ask the group, because we currently don't have any other items to discuss on Thursday. So we can continue. We can allow you to keep going if folks are okay with that, and then spill over to the Thursday session. Anybody have comments or questions?
I mean, it's probably good to let Gary have his time today.
Well, so what I would do is cut you off 15 minutes before the hour. So another, golly, I'm not awake. Another 39 minutes.
Okay.
So you think you have enough? 39 minutes, is that enough to get you going? Are you going to need time on Thursday?
It's a little hard to predict how the discussions will go.
Okay, so let's revisit that when I need to let Gary go. Okay?
Okay, so I have about 39 minutes, and then it's Gary's turn.
Yeah, I just ate 2 minutes of that, but yes, and I'll give
Okay.
you a time check.
37 minutes. Okay, no problem. Okay. All right. Next slide. Yes. Okay. So we've had a lot of this discussion already when Hank brought it up. So this was the planned work on identifying verifier input. So I was going to add some discussion on key identification to the EAT draft. So this is, you can do it by COSE KID or by the COSE X509 draft. That's in the works right now. So there would be probably a normative reference to that, although that is being proposed. They're unclear whether they're going to make that informational or standard at this point. It seems obvious that it should be standard to me, but then I was planning on headers to identify endorsements, but no definition of any content type for endorsements. And then perhaps headers, COSE headers to identify reference values, a place to get reference values. So perhaps a URL, but no definition of the format or the content type for reference values. So we discussed this some with Hank. I don't know, any further comments on that?
Nope. Don't
Okay.
see anybody on the queue.
All right.
Next.
Next slide, please. Okay, so public key inclusion. So first, I've got a list of some use cases that attestation use cases I've seen in the real world that include a public key as a claim. So FIDO does this. although it has specific semantics around what that public key means. IoT onboarding does this, and I know Geary and the FIDO. So there's FIDO user authentication, but there's also a FIDO IoT working group that's working on FIDO IoT onboarding that Geary will discuss after I'm done here. So that uses a public key inside an attestation. And then Android attestation is very much about public keys. So these are, it's critical for, there's a bunch of use cases that are very critical, that for which public keys are really critical in the, including them as claims. So the thing with them is that the semantics of what that public key means varies a lot by the use case. And when I tried to sort of write that down, I realized that it didn't really seem to make sense to put those semantics inside EAT. For example, FIDO binds the FIDO authentication binds a public key to a triple of a user, a device, and a relying party that you're authenticating for. So that's very authentication specific and very FIDO specific, and really does not belong in EAT. IoT onboarding, sometimes they call it a CSR, but it's really not exactly a CSR because you're not actually producing a certificate. It's just CSR is convenient for what. So I decided it did not make sense to describe the use cases for public key inclusion. So what I put in my pull request was that keys should be in the COSE key or the JW key format. It's not a must, it's just a should. It's a hint or strong encouragement. One of the reasons I thought this was useful is I looked at some of the work that's being done on Android attestation, and they're putting keys in a format that's not any of these. And it seems like we would want to orient around COSE key and JW key. So the pull request says keys should be in COSE key format or JWK format, that use cases should define claims for their particular semantics. It also says you can use the RFC 8747 confirmation claim. This is obviously a published RFC and a registered CWT claim. The semantics of that are in the confirmation claim. The semantics of a confirmation claim in EAT are not defined. Again, it's left up to the use case. So that's what's in the pull request. There's a few other things that might be interesting to add. We might want to put in the security level of key protection. We have a security level claim and some definition of how to do that. Whether biometric authentication is required to use a key, that is something that is common to FIDO and Android. That's something else that we might want to put in, but it is a fairly large can of worms. I know the rules for user authentication in FIDO are pretty complicated. How the biometric authentication controls the use of a key when you start thinking about fingerprints versus pins versus Face ID and all of that stuff and enrollment. So another possibility is the intended use of a key, which may have something related to Geary's context. So I'm going to stop there for comments and discussion.
Hank?
Hi, Lawrence. Sorry for being on the mic so often here. Very attentively and very carefully, I want to raise a question I raised, I don't know, about 2 or 3 years ago when chartering, and it was shot down harsh solely. And so I'm very, very carefully re-raising this. So if you include a public key here in an EAT, you basically are proving the possession of the private key, right? That's some point to it, or is that not the intent here?
Maybe.
Yeah, because
mean,
there is this proof of possession thingy, and everybody saying, no, this is not proof of possession. But somehow I still feel the vibes of proof of possession here. That I wanted to highlight this this perception at least again.
So, when you say proof of possession, do you mean like in a CSR or what's vaguely mentioned in 8747? You know, you sign a nonce with the key, and therefore you prove possession of it.
Yeah, there are flavors for this. I basically I'm referring to the work I think that was once done in ACE. Actually, I'm not sure of the current status of POP there, but there is a proof of possession draft somewhere here in the ITEF. And I think it's covering some of the problems that are maybe part of the discussion of public key inclusion.
So 8747 is proof of possession.
It's done already. Okay, yeah, sorry, I should have done this. Sorry.
But it doesn't actually say how to do it. It just says you should, and it's not defined here. But at least a little anyway. Maybe Hannes has something to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
So the issue is, and that came indeed up in OAuth, is so it depends on what public key are we talking about here, and is that public key then also supported at some place with the proof of possession, so that the party that puts the public key in there also demonstrate that it has a possession of the private key, and that's maybe needed in some cases and maybe not needed, but to me it's not quite clear what that public key would be, and maybe Lawrence, you can elaborate.
So I think this just highlights the point, and the conclusion I came to was that we can't really say what all of these things are, of whether you need to show proof of possession or not, or what the key means, because those semantics are highly dependent on the use case. So mostly what the pull request says is, please use COSE key format or JW key format.
Okay, so and like if you say that, I think it's fine. It follows the same style as the 8747, which also just says here's, if you want to pass the key along, a public key, for example, then here's how you do it. But then you need to explain in a profile or in application specific use case on what this means in the bigger system context.
Yeah, right.
Okay, got it. Well, thanks. That makes sense.
So the difference between 8747 and COSE key is mostly that you can encrypt the key, and you can pass the key by key ID. So either one works. You could just use COSE key in a claim, or you could use 8747 in a claim. Either one's fine. But 8747 does define a specific claim with a claim key, which is why it's and has registered it with CWT, which is why I'm wanted some discussion of it. Okay, so it sounds like most everybody's okay with the proposed text. Okay. What about something that gives you the security level of key protection? Any interest in that? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Next slide. Thomas?
Sorry. Lawrence, what was the question? I was taking notes and I couldn't hear exactly what you said.
Oh, my question is it worth defining some field or some kind of decoration for keys that would indicate the level of protection they have? So we could use the same security levels we use for the security level claim and say, well, this key is protected by TEE, this claim is protected by like a secure element, and this claim is protected at the high level operating system. I mean, FIDO does this.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it might be useful. I can see one use case that of mine that would need this, but not sure we can standardize on a generic semantics here. But yeah, I would like to discuss this with you maybe.
Okay. So maybe I'll put some draft text in the pull request for that for discussion. Okay. So this I'm hoping for some inputs from ARM and Qualcomm. Like I said, this is some of the part that I'm personally less clear on exactly where to go with this. So ARM PSA defines a profile claim. It's a string that names a profile document to which the EAT complies. We've talked a lot about profiles here, maybe not recently, but in the past as a document that says which claims can be used in this use case, and whether you comply with this profile or not. And then Qualcomm has this context claim, which classifies EATs into these 6 categories: on-demand, registration, provisioning, certificate issuance, and proof of possession. So this all seems to be kind of getting to use case, some specifics about use case. So I kind of lumped them together here. So maybe comments or discussion on this. I'm actually not quite sure what to write on some of these things. Dave?
Dave?
Yeah, so I've tried to figure out what the term profile means, and is it the same concept as EKU, or is it a completely different concept?
I don't know what EKU is.
Extended key usage.
No, I think it's something.
Some things that say what it's appropriate to be used for. So, for example, is it appropriate to be used for web authentication, or is it used for router authentication, or what? And so EKU is a limit on what that key or certificate can be used for.
Like the attestation key.
Yeah, attestation would be an example of a potential EKU value. I'd say it's a term that's used in existing RFCs, and I'm trying to figure out whether profile was the same thing, in which case I don't know if there's an IANA numbering space and one of the things we can just use or not, or if it just happens to be a similar concept, but you need a special numbering space because you need to be an integer, compressible or something, or whether it's an unrelated concept, and I can't tell.
It's definitely not the same. Maybe Thomas can say.
Yeah, it's not the same. Not in the PSA case, it's not that. It's in PSA case that the profile means which claims are used, what is the semantics expected from these claims, and what is the interrelation between those claims. So is not EKU definitely.
Yeah, so you could, in a profile, you could say you can never use this claim if you're using this profile. And if you're using that claim, you can only use it this way. Stuff like that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because I asked what's a profile, and I didn't get a good answer to what's a profile.
Well, the ARM PSA document is a profile document.
It is. Can you give a short summary, maybe 1 or 2 sentences, that's the definition of it?
It lists some claims that you can't use. It refines the semantics of some claims, or narrows them, and it even defines new claims. It's almost
a document as in a specification, it would be an RFC, or an RFC-like document. Is that what you mean by a document? Is something that gets published and you conform to?
The plan for PSA is to publish it as an informational RFC. Yes.
But I don't think all profiles need to be even published by IETF.
I think it depends on the policy for claims allocation for the map numbers allocation, right? What kind of specification is needed for registering one?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like I would imagine the FIDO SDO IoT work would author and publish a profile.
Yeah, that's actually our intention.
So maybe Henk?
Yeah, sorry, this is Hank. Sorry for just grabbing the mic, snatching it. So when you talk about claims and then you are illustrating how these claims are to be used in certain contexts, so the user of these claims is the verifier, and if you tell a verifier how to do stuff, it's a policy to me. This really sounds like an attestation policy to me right now.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So maybe it's not an endorsement at all.
Yeah, good comment. Okay. Gary, do you want to talk about the context claim a bit?
So, sorry, go ahead,
Thomas, yeah.
interrupt. In our case, this the profile is an input to the policy. In fact, there is a claim that is an input to the dynamic policy. Exactly as Hank said.
So it's almost like you want a policy ID along with reference values ID along with an endorsement ID.
No, because it's not. So the policy is not referenced by that. The policy can use that claim to inform the policy decisions, but is not an identifier for the policy itself. You can build a policy on top of that. That's what I'm saying. It's not a one-to-one, right? You could have the same profile and many different policies that build on top of that profile.
Okay. I'm not quite sure where to go with this, but I definitely some input. Thank you. So Gary, do you want to talk about the context claim some?
Yeah, it's fairly self-explanatory. It's a context claim provides provides metadata from the attester onto the intended usage of the attestation. So we had talked about key attestations. So I think I can give a specific example. We actually have a case that we sometimes call internally, and I've described this on the GitHub repo, hardened TLS, where in a trusted execution environment, a client certificate is actually requested for a key pair that's contained within a trusted environment to be used as part of client auth for TLS connection. And in that case, for instance, a CSR would actually, the context claim would be set to indicate that it's primarily being used for CSR. It can be used for other purposes too, as seen in the description that Lawrence has provided on the slide. I've already created a pull request. I think it's fairly straightforward to include in the spec. I didn't really feel it was a need to actually put it in a profile. And as we know, all claims are optional. So if there's a situation where the attester should not provide context, then obviously the attester can exclude it. Well, that's my description.
Okay. I see Thomas and Hank on the queue.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Sorry, Thomas.
I wasn't sure because, anyway. Go ahead,
Yeah, sorry,
Hank.
Snapshot here again. Hank again. So this context claim, now that I heard something about it, like explained it to me, thank you for that. How is that different, really different from the audience claim that comes with web tokens? So if you would assign principal roles to all these things like on demand or provisioning or POP here, how is that different to the audience claim?
It's a good comparison. It's similar, but I don't believe it. My interpretation of audience claim is it doesn't describe the intention and the intended usage of the token itself. If you have a different view of that, let me know. But that's my reading of the spec.
Yeah, so the audience claim requires you to identify the intended consumer, and that is typically a principal with the A at the end that has a specific duty. And so if the duty is, this is a list of duties here, or tasks or things you want to achieve, like show something like provisioning or do something like provisioning, then I think it's quite similar. You're skipping the association of the duty with the principal, and you're just highlighting the duty. So that's I guess it's more loosely defined then. So semantically a bit weaker, and I wonder, would it be of benefit to actually use the audience claim then, and that forces you to think ahead and understand what the role of the consumer is here beforehand?
I think it could, I think something like context claim could certainly be used in conjunction with the audience claim. So yeah, I think the two can be used together. And as I mentioned, I don't think the audience claim captures the current in its current definition captures the semantics that that's intended with the context claim. So I don't know what would be. There may be a way to extend audience claim in order to do so, but I'm not really sure how.
Yeah, or the other way around, sorry for still speaking up, making this a little bit more precise, adding a principal's duty here, as a principal to the duty here, and then you're basically at audience claim. So that would be the other way around. And I'm not saying it has to be so, I'm just giving food for thought that this is probably already possible with the existing claim.
So there's no enforcement here, like, you know, what if you use a registration token for proof of possession? Is that, there's no, it's not like a key use thing that you're supposed to use it this way. It's just it's more of a hint of like, well, I put the right fields in here for registration. So if you're going to use it for proof of possession, you might be confused. Is that? Is that how this
it's
goes?
sort of similar to audience from that perspective, in that if the claim if the attestation is received by an unintended audience, or in this case by a verifier who is not expecting this attestation in the particular context of the operations they're trying to perform, then this would actually be something they can actually consider as part of the policy in deciding what the next steps are, whatever the verifier policy is. So yeah, but I think, for instance, if the verifier is meant to only, if a verifier is only meant to verify proof of possession tokens, and it receives one that's associated with CSR, there's nothing in the standard we can do to prevent the verifier from actually going through and processing the token if they have the necessary endorsement material in order to do so.
Okay. So would we want a registry of all of these different possible contexts? Because I don't think we're going to think of them all right now.
I was hoping this list would be comprehensive. If it's not, we should try to do our best to make it comprehensive before registering. And if it's not, and if the registry is still not sufficient to capture a future use case, then I guess it would have to be something that would be defined in a use case specific profile of the token rather than the spec itself.
Because there's no, so like in FIDO, I guess you would call the FIDO use of attestation would be FIDO user verification would be the registration context. I don't know.
It would be. The attestation would be signing across the public key. The attestation would be signing across a FIDO concept called client data, which is associated with the authentication credential and the relying party that's requested creation of the credential. So that would all be associated with registration. That would be the time where attestation is actually most likely to be used in the FIDO context.
So you would classify that as registration or as proof of possession?
It as registration. I think with FIDO, if you've looked at the FIDO 2 specification, more specifically the web authentication specification, they don't really have a concept of runtime attestation associated with the credential. It's generally expected you get an attestation when the credential is created, you can re-request it. The attestation would only change based on the challenge data that's provided by that's provided in part by the RP in order to ensure freshness of the token, but the contents wouldn't change.
Yeah. Okay.
So time
Okay.
check forms. You've got about
How many more minutes?
7.
7. Okay. Thank you.
We have 1 slide left as far as I can
Yeah.
tell.
Yep.
I wouldn't view context as a blocker to EAT because in the slide deck I'm about to present, we have FIDO has a pretty big dependency on EAT completion. At the same time, the pull request is fairly straightforward, so I think we can actually get it done in short order if participants feel feel we should include it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, let's do the last slide, if there's no more comments here. Okay, so I filed a pull request for this, I don't know, about 14 hours ago. So this is, measurement of the running state so of a subsystem. So an example of this is Linux IMA or Samsung TIMA. Qualcomm has a product like this too, Arctic. So in this, the example is that the TEE periodically measures the high-level OS at runtime. So TEEs can typically have access to all the memory space of the high-level OS, so they can go measure, the kernel code or some static data or things like that. So that is just an example. The results of this measurement can be evaluated in the TEE, in which case the claim just indicates success or failure, or the TEE can send the measurements to the verifier and let the verifier evaluate it. I think this is more valuable than measurement only once at boot. There's some of these things actually will do a measurement like this before you're doing a high value financial transaction, to detect routing and things like that. I didn't see this in COSWID, so I made these slides like a couple days ago before I tried to write a pull request. So the pull request doesn't use COSWID; it just proposes some measurements. I see value in this, given that there are several products out there that do it. So I've proposed a pull request for it. Probably needs some thinking, a little more thinking on that pull request, and careful cross check with like Linux IMA or something like that. So comments, questions, Hank?
Yes, hi, this is Hank. Yes, so there's a question here about COSWID. That's why I'm queuing. Yes, so COSWID can report measurements. There's actually a complete set of tags that is called an evidence tag, literally. That was created by ISO, that type. And so these evidence tags have a certain hardware-specific scope. It's a device scope, of course, or it could be a component scope of a composite device. And they are used to report on a snapshot, so to speak, of the device. If you're going with these continuous measurements, then it's probably more like you just highlighted the IMA. But if you report a certain state at a single point of time, I think COSWID is a thing to do it, actually.
So for example, if you wanted let's say there's a vector of 10 hashes of the Linux kernel that you're measuring, of the loaded running Linux kernel, 10 different text segments. Could COSWID report that?
That is a little bit of an abstract description. So it sounds like, are you talking about evidence quotes or event log that complements them? So that would be my first question here. But this is a little bit of a specific TPM-ish language I'm using now, just to make a specific request on what you actually mean with this text.
So
creating.
the program text is loaded into RAM. It's the Linux kernel, the program text of the Linux kernel, and you say from memory starting this address to that address, I expect the SHA-256 hash of this range of memory that's the Linux kernel code text to have a specific hash if the device is not rooted.
I see now. In-memory measurements are possible with CoSWIT. There is a process ID identifier for a resource here. I think it is underspecified. So, for example, if you have a certain process in execution, code in execution, it's a process, then it is, I think, underspecified to identify specific register pages here, memory pages here. That is, I think, a gap. Also, it's very specific, and it's way beyond IMA, I think. But I would not say that CoSWIT would do in memory. Sorry.
I have to call time. So the real quick question is, how do you want to proceed, Lawrence? Do you need more time to close? You're having a good discussion, but I also want to respect the fact that we gave Gary
Yeah, that's fine.
time for the.
It looks like Thomas was in the queue. I'll catch up with him separately, and I think that was the last slide. So I think I'm basically done.
Okay.
And I'll catch up with Thomas on his comments separately.
All right. Thanks. Okay.
Thank you
so
for
with
the
that,
inputs.
We'll move. Yep. So Lawrence, as I bring up Gary's, feel free to raise these comments or questions to incite discussion on the mail list too.
Yeah, okay. Usually, no problem.
Okay.
Okay.
Gary?
Yes, thank you. Also, if I could request the chairs, I'm having a little bit of difficulty seeing who is adding themselves to the queue on my local MeetEcho client. It's probably a user error, not MeetEcho itself. So if somebody gets on the queue, please let me know. So just to give a little bit of background, I'm actually coming in not as and making this presentation not as a co-editor of the EAT document, but as a representative of the FIDO Alliance, particularly the FIDO IoT working group. I'm the co-chair of that particular working group, and this discussion is a little bit about the FIDO IoT specification and its dependencies on the EAT spec. So we go to slide 2, please. So I think many people already know this, but in case there are people that don't, just to give a very brief intro, the Fast Identity Online Alliance is a standards and certification body that's primarily focused on passwordless authentication. And there are several standards that have already enabled interoperable user authentication, including biometrics, and then there's associated security and functional certification programs. We kicked off an effort on IoT secure onboarding, and the first specification was released at the end of the summer. I invite all members of the working group to please review it. We are interested in feedback. We go to slide 3, please. Yeah, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So what does onboarding entail? And by the way, oh, sorry, could you go back? Thank you. So there are 3 steps. And by the way, this is my definition, but I'm sure other parties have slightly different takes on this concept. But basically, it's where an OEM completes manufacturing of the device and ships. The end user purchases the device, puts it in its in its intended location for operation, and powers it up for the first time, then the end user is able to establish an ownership relationship with the device, whereupon they can actually manage the device going forward during its life cycle. So it's almost a transition between a manufacturer's ownership to the intended end user. Zero-touch onboarding is the goal for most manufacturers. It's debatable as to whether anybody's actually able to achieve it, and that's basically where the user powers up the device for the first time and is able to establish ownership with minimal intervention. So there are several different approaches to onboarding. One approach I described below, for instance, installing an app on a smartphone, using that app to connect to a cloud service which the user can authenticate to, using that same app on the personal device to connect to the IoT device, and then ownership is established via the cloud service. So you sometimes see this, for instance, in home automation, like connected devices may be attached to an ownership to a credential that's associated with a cloud service that the user uses. An example could be the Google password with Nest thermostats as being one that's fairly common. Okay, now we can go to the next slide. So this is mainly for persons who are not members of the working group, and this is just a description of attestation. But attestation actually forms a critical part of the onboarding process, not just in the sense that the security state of the device can be established, it can be assessed by the owner or a service operating on behalf of the owner, but also the device itself can assess the authenticity of an owner to be onboarded. If there's, and I know at least in the case of my employer, we had several customers where it's very important that only the owner be allowed to onboard the device. Please, let's go to the next slide. So this is the FIDO IoT system architecture. So starting from the left, the IoT onboard device is the primary actor. It's the device to be onboarded. The device may or may not have IP connectivity, in which case it may have to, if it only has local connectivity, such as a Bluetooth, only Bluetooth or NFC access, then it may have to make use of an intermediary to contact the two entities on the right. The two entities on the right, the first one is a rendezvous service. So in the FIDO specification currently, the device, when it first powers up, it'll contact the rendezvous service and the rendezvous service will do a minimum form of authentication of the device, including consumption of the attestation, and would then be able to redirect the onboard device to the onboard owner. So this allows the onboard owner to be prevented from a lot of spurious onboarding requests from inauthentic devices. If we go to the next slide, and now I have 7 minutes left. So there are 4 protocols defined in the FIDO specification. The first one is device initialization, which is how the manufacturer actually provisions the IoT device with all the necessary security-related information it needs during manufacture time. This could include even the attestation keys. Then there's 3 transfer ownership protocols. The first one is TO0, in which case the device owner feeds information into the rendezvous server about the device to be onboarded. And the primary information regarding that device is the unique ID, or we call it a GUID in FIDO in the IoT spec. TO1, the device contacts and identifies itself to a rendezvous server. This is, as I mentioned, it can be done on first power up after manufacture, or after a factory reset. Then TO2, the device contacts the owner to complete the onboarding process, and TO0 through TO2 are all attestable flows. Device initialization and TO0 they're not, the actual protocol flows aren't normatively defined in the spec. It's only the end states, but TO1 and TO2 are defined. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay. So in the FIDO specification, currently TO1 and TO2 leverage EAT. The minimum required claims are the nonce and the UEID. Our intentions are to complete standardization and complete the standard and launch an interop and certification program. And this is where we're running into a bit of an issue. The EAT standard is not complete. The proposed claims are not registered. And at least FIDO can't complete the standard and launch a certification program using the CWT private space. This is mainly because certification has to be done on a finished product, and vendors will actually prefer to productize with registered claims and not the private space. So when those registered claims become available, vendors would like to actually move forward and leverage them rather than doing something that may not be interoperable. Well, let's move to the final slide. So our request, as of today, the EAT spec is not ready for last call. So FIDO requests accelerating, this is a little clumsily worded, I apologize for that. FIDO requests acceleration of the registry of a minimal subset of the claims outlined in the current EAT draft with IANA, which would mean that we would be registering claims prior to the RFC publication. So these would be claims that we're fairly confident on are actually sufficiently defined in the spec and are not going to change as a result of the review leading to and following last call. And the request is that we determine a minimum set of claims and complete the registration no later than the next IETF. So this is the request on behalf of the Alliance. I can take questions in the few minutes we have left.
Lawrence is in the queue.
Yes, please.
Is it just the nonce and UEID claims? What's the set of claims?
That's actually the set of claims that's required for FIDO to move forward. I don't want to actually be, we didn't want to be so prescriptive as to just say those two claims. So if there's any other claims that the group feels comfortable in the EAT spec, then we would also like to see us move forward with the registration of them.
Yeah, I'm interested in other people's wisdom and how they've handled this before, because this is certainly not the first time that people have implemented specs with stuff not in the IANA registry.
Hannes.
Yeah, hi, this is Hannes. I was wondering whether it's possible to make the registration into the IANA registration prior to the EAT document getting published, as a sort of like to just preserve the code point, so to speak. Because the problem I can see is that someone else comes along and registers something else on top of that, and then there would be obviously confusion. There would still be the problem that if the semantics of those two claims changes, then that's indeed an issue. But yeah, but I think something can be done about the former, not about the second aspect.
Hannes, thank you for that. It's very early here for me, but I think you're right. I think there is a way to do that. So maybe we can work with our AD and try to figure that out as well.
Yeah, I was going to add, I think we would have to have some kind of review process too, to ensure that we need to create the structure for the IANA registry, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So, so Gary, I think to me, the request is a little too open-ended, especially because you're setting a timeline. I think it would be good if you requested the specific claims. This goes back to Lawrence's question. It would be good if there was a set of prioritization on the claims that we could at least focus on.
Okay, I can post a proposal to the mailing list.
Yeah.
This is Hannes again. My understanding is that we are actually reusing the claims registry from CWT. So in that sense, it would be possible to reserve these code points. In my sort of naive view.
Okay, my brain's not functioning very well. So I thought we were using CWT, but I'm not sure. I have to go back and look at the minutes. I'm not sure if we had closed the notion of us defining our own set of RATS claims within that.
I'm operating, I think it's CWT and JWT registries, and that's what's in the document.
Okay.
Yeah, that would obviously be crucial, a crucial aspect in this whole story to decide where those what the registry actually is.
And I think there's consensus on this.
Okay, cool. Then that my understanding is correct. Yeah.
This is saying, sorry for interjecting, but there is was a suggestion that was never resolved for adding columns to the registry that could tag intent of the claim here with respect to remote visitation, for example.
Yep. Okay, so we are well out of time. So can we take this to the list and have the discussion so that we can figure out the way forward in defining our IANA registry? Yeah, in the CWT, yes. Okay, so with that, I thank everyone. I guess given that we completed the agenda, I will go ahead and cancel the Thursday session. Given that, thank you everyone. Have a good rest of your week.
Good night. Bye.
Everyone. Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ned.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks, on.